With the recent passing of Roger Corman, I wanted to try and honor the man that introduced me to a love of low-budget movies. So let's jump right in. This is 1961's Pit and the Pendulum. After slightly disturbing opening credits, which may reflect the main character's mindset, Francis travels along a gorgeous stretch of coast to the looming Medina Castle matte painting in the distance. Unsettling music accompanies his trip. Upon meeting Catherine Medina, Francis becomes a probing reporter on the unexpected passing of his sister, the wife of Catherine's brother, Nicholas.
Perhaps, Donya, may I see your brother now? May I visit my sister's grave now? If we may go there, then? When did she die? Why was I not notified sooner? How did she die? What's that noise?
After discovering the source of the noise, Nicholas hesitantly answers Francis's questions. It turns out that Elizabeth was killed by the oppressive atmosphere of the castle, which traces its roots to Nicholas's father, a renowned executioner during the Spanish Inquisition. And he did it all from the comfort of his own version of a man cave. Elizabeth gained a morbid fascination with the torture chamber, and after the scene turns a deadly shade of purple, she locks herself in the Iron Maiden and becomes a human pincushion. Catherine explains that in addition to the guilt Nicholas carries over the death of Elizabeth, he also carries secondhand guilt from the terrible things he witnessed as a child. The worst by far being the slow execution of his mother and uncle by his father after discovering their illicit affair. To say Nicholas might be dealing with some hardcore trauma is an understatement. Elizabeth's voice and presence are felt all over the castle, ultimately leading to the exhuming of her corpse to make sure she's actually dead. It's found she died.
I'm not dead.
Fine. Eventually died in a horrible way. All this further cracks Nicholas's mind despite assurances by Dr. Leon that he swears she was
No more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to meet its maker.
Elizabeth continues to call to Nicholas, compelling him to venture through cobwebs, locked doors, and more cobwebs, leading to the darkest depths of the castle. Her voice always calling, His madness grows the further he goes, and the sight of Elizabeth's hand peeking from the casket turns him giddy. He tries to escape, but ends up in the torture chamber, and one final call of his name, Nicholas, drives him over the edge. Dr. Leon shows up and makes it clear that he and Elizabeth planned the scheme from the start. Elizabeth taunts the catatonic Nicholas, which turns out to be a very bad idea. He comes back to it, but in the mindset of his father, convinced that Elizabeth and Leon are Isabel and Bartolome. Torture ensues and Nicholas mistakes Francis for Bartolome after Leon disappears. He drags Francis to his father's greatest torture device, the titular,
The pit and the pendulum.
and the true horror begins. From here, you're on your own to deal with the pit and the pendulum. And I truly hope that you don't find yourself split over what comes next. 1961's Pit and the Pendulum was the second of Corman's famous post-cycle. It stars the absolutely fantastic Vincent Price and the devilishly delightful Barbara Steele. The screenplay, done by Richard Matheson, was based very loosely on Poe's story of the same name. For note, the short story was 64 pages long and is on the perspective of a man about to be tortured by the titular device. The only link it shares with the Corman movie are the last few pages which feature the pendulum in action. Matheson built the rest of the story from scratch, keeping it in the style of Poe as much as possible. It was shot over the course of 15 days using set pieces from old productions gathered from major studio backlots. They also sprayed 20 gallons of cobwebbing to add atmosphere. The pendulum itself was 18 feet long and weighed about a ton. Overall, Pit was a bigger financial hit than Corman's House of Usher, and went on to be the biggest success of the Poe movies made by American International Pictures. Because of Pitt's success, AIP went on to do 7 more Poe-inspired tales, all directed by Corman and most starring Vincent Price. Its influence in both pacing and atmosphere can be seen in everything from Giallo to Stephen King. Now, my first exposure to Corman was weirdly an after-school religious ed Halloween party when I was 7. We watched The Pit and the Pendulum, and even though it was a strange choice for a bunch of Catholic kids, I was both terrified and enthralled by it. Vincent Price's crazed grin as he descends further into madness, the eerie corpse of Elizabeth, and the way the last 10 minutes were handled in both shooting and editing started me on a love of B-movies. For a kid versed mostly in Disney and Westerns, I was amazed that something like this made it to the big screen. As I grew, I got around to Corman's other Poe adaptations, as well as Bucket of Blood and the 60s Little Shop of Horrors, Shopping Mall, all the MST3K features, and so many others. The Poe cycle movies have always stood out amongst Corman's impressive body of work. Corman and Vincent Price were lightning in a bottle. There's something so magical about what they did. Regardless of story, Price's ability to portray such a range of emotions that straddle the line between serious and schlocky, matched with everything Corman could bring with a shoestring budget, was incredible. He knew how to work within his budget, sourcing what was needed to bring an idea to life while keeping focus on putting money on the things that really mattered. Together they made lavish pieces that were both gothically stunning and completely terrifying. He could make things unsettling with just the tone of music or the way something was edited. It was an impressive skill. I understand that Corman was 98 years old, which is a lot more life than a lot of us will ever see, but that doesn't take away from what we lost when he passed. Like many, I owe the man a great deal of thanks for the joy that he brought me through his art. I'm a more well-rounded, well-informed lover of cinema because of him, and for that I will be forever grateful for a random movie choice made at an after-school Halloween party when I was a kid. Roger, although you will never see this, thank you for all you gave us.